Hello and welcome to Inside Out. It is a pleasure having you with us. I am Yvonne Mokwandani. Now on the program today, we're looking at the New Marriage Act, Chapter 5.15. Now this law came into effect on the 27th of May 2022, and according to this law, no marriage is above the other. To help us with the conversation, we're joined by Rumbidzai Venge. Rumbidzai is a legal analyst. We're also joined by Junith Mupudzi from WWWOA, which is Widowers and Orphans Association. We also have Chief Nsiasali. Chief, thank you for joining us. And ladies, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks,
Now, to start off with the conversation, I'll start with you, Rumbi. May you please give us a breakdown, just in brief, of this new law?
Thanks, Yvonne, and thanks to our listeners and viewers. You know, when we're looking at this marriage law, like you said initially, this is a law that comes in because prevailing in Zimbabwe, we had 3 marriage institutions, of which 2 of them were recognized by law, meaning that those who are married under customary law, the unregistered customary law unions, these were not recognized as marriages for purposes of the law upon divorce. It was recognized upon someone passing away, but it was then often very difficult for people in unregistered customary law unions to prove that they were married. As you can imagine, 20 years on, Monzi budisaibe para makabhadhara kuti makazotengati, we want witnesses, we want minyai. So that was an increasing problem. And the majority of people who are married in this country were married under unregistered customary law unions, or UCLUs. Then we have our registered customary law unions, which are potentially polygamous. But it recognizes the customary rights that are required for a marriage to have been solemnized at customary stage, and then you could get a marriage certificate for all of your wives if you wanted. Then we have the more popular one, Chapter 37, formerly Chapter 511. This is the general law marriage, monogamous, one man, one wife. So there was an increasing problem because there was unequal recognition of these marriages at law. So the first thing that the Marriages Act does, even by its title, Marriages Act, it is a plural. So now all of those marriages come in there and they're all now equal. They're all recognized as marriages. The unregistered customary law unions need to be registered within a certain period, but this will then encourage that people come forward, register their marriages, and that upon divorce, the Matrimonial Causes Act is used for all of these marriages. It also introduces an interesting 4th marriage, which is called a qualified marriage. So it really is the law's effort to drag the net and have as many people included as possible, because previously the law was very stringent and strict on what it recognized as marriage. Okay,
so help me understand, right? We say this is the Marriages, right, Act. It encompasses all these marriages that you've explained. Let's say I'm married under the former Chapter 37, right? And I have my husband. Can he then go on and marry someone else under a different kind of marriage, maybe registered customary union? Inindi nemchato wangu iwoyo Chapter 37 yacho yavagara vachiziva murume onorora mukadzi zvinoita
by the simple fact that Chapter 37, Chapter 511 remains one man, one woman. Wife. It is monogamous.
But is there any other that allows that?
The customary law allows you to do that because it's potentially polygamous. Saka ukada mukawirirana nemadzimai enyu, you can have as many wives as you like, but each wife has to have their bride, their customary law rights performed until it's recognized under whatever, because we've also got different cultures.
I ask this because they have a lot of questions, especially because of the civil partnerships and whatever. What does this mean for us? What does this mean? Am I still protected? Can I just still be the only single wife that my husband has? They're worried.
You can be. You remain the only wife, but in terms of the concubines, a lot of the concubines now, or those who are in relationships with people who have my Chapter 511, now also have rights that are established under the Marriages Act. Anonzima Civil Partnerships.
Okay, I'll come back to you.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
All right, coming to you, Chief Siansali. What does this mean? In terms of culture yedu, magariro edu, tsika dzedu, sechivan, sevan vatema, takatarisa mtemo uyu watanao.
Thank you, Yvonne. Us as traditional leaders, I think we welcome this act.
Okay.
In the sense that it is now bringing on board the customary marriage as an equal marriage to any other marriage.
Okay.
Because of late, it was like the customary marriage was an inferior marriage. Hence the reason why most people were rushing to go and get that other civilized, as they call it, marriage. But from our perspective as traditional leaders, marriage has been there even before these white weddings. So we had our way of recognizing that people have married and it's recognized. So bringing on board that marriage and putting it par is actually a very noble idea and quite welcomed. Again, it recognizes us traditional leaders to say we can now chatisavan.
Okay.
Chatisavan because we stay with people and the customary marriage tisinoinzwisisa kuti munhu kuti anzi arora anenge aitei nechi what are the main key things that are observed for it to qualify it to be what?
To be marriage.
And as such, we did not err, or government did not err by bringing in the traditional leaders.
Okay.
More so, this act has dealt with one issue that was a thorn on the hearts of traditional leaders, that is the legal age of
consent.
Marriage. Because the age of consent and age of marriage were a very big thorn, such that we were witnessing a lot of child marriages, and traditional leaders could not have done anything because the law was silent on that. But the general public was castigating us, saying we are not doing anything, but we had no supporting legislation. With this now, I think we are a milestone. We have gone a step ahead. It's now more Afrocentric than the Euro one that we had.
Okay. Yeah. Coming to you, Joneth, as an organization that represents ma widows, vanhu vanenge vakashayikirwa nevarume nerera ma-orphans, mutemo uyu muri kugamuchira sei?
Mutemo uyu tiri kugamuchira zvakanaka chaizvo, asi hausi kuzofamba nezvauri. Nekuti iye zvinezvi zviri kuitika iye zvinezvi, mwana ari kuzochema kakawanda, maybe akutodzingwa pamba nehama dzemufi, baba vafa, mai vafa, vana vanodzingwa pamba ipapo. Tine dambudziko rakakura rakadaro ratiri kuona. Todzoka futi kuna amai nababa, mai nababa vanezenge vatora mumwe mukadzi iye vanezenge vatora iyeye, vafa vaina iyeye, amai vaenda sanduke kumusha, varivo vanga vakaroorwa nababa vaine muchato. Mai voenda kumusha vachirima vari kumusha. Unozoona kuti baba ava vafa maybe neaccident ende haungazivi kuti chii changoitika kuti munhu afe. Asi unozoona paakunzi pamutemo zvinhu zviri kutorwa naamai ninava, nekuti ndo baba vafa vaparara vainani, ndiye mukadzi wava wanga vainaye. Saka zviri kuzoshungurudza zvizhinji kune vakadzi vakanga vakaroorwa nekuda kwemutemo wachiyungu.
How does that work, Rambi? What she's explaining.
Thank you so much for highlighting that. You know what, Yvonne, it is really very heart-wrenching to hear about the stories that widows, widowers, and the orphans endure. So the major thing is, and this is a fact, I don't know why people wait until Munafa to then want to descend on their property. Property grabbing is real. Property grabbing happens, and the main victims are the widow, at the hands of the relatives, the children also at the hands of the relatives. And in this situation where perhaps this man was married under Chapter 511, is estranged from his wife, moves away and is with another woman, that woman at law is not the surviving spouse. So it's important to then understand these things, because when you are now going after winding up the estate and getting the affairs in order, the law will recognize the surviving spouse. Worse still, when someone dies without a will and then intestate, the surviving spouse has rights that are outlaid in statute very clearly. So the surviving spouse ndiane pamtemo mvumo yekunge achitora matrimonial home, then vana vozouyawo, and then they also then get a share. But the surviving spouse at law anotopiwa chinzvimbo chake, getting the lion's share, if you like, and then even actually then also being able to get a children's share out of the residual of this estate. But kana tisingazvizivi semadzimai, or if you're out there and you don't follow up, you might then be disadvantaged. But I want to just speak to vaya vanenge vane marriage certificate, at law you are the surviving spouse, and it's important kuti register those estates and that you then produce these documents. In the situation where mukadzi ariko or angariko before was married customarily and there's no record, it becomes difficult now to prove that I was married, and these are some of the challenges that I think the law seeks to address with this Marriages Act.
I also want to understand something, right? We say under this new law, no marriage is above the other. Is that right?
This is true.
And Chief Vataura vakati now, according to mtemo munyowano watanawo, vane simba rekuchatisa,
yes.
Right? So usually you find kuti if one gets married, chinotanga kubvisirwa roora. Let's say ikonoesha mtemo wapo ndachatiswa nani na chief, that's a registered customary union,
yes,
right? Which is potentially polygamous.
Mm-hmm.
Ndabva ndakwenda kunochata 5.11, which is a monogamous marriage. Pane zvinofamba sei ndeupi takaisa pascale tichiti yese yakafanana but ndine two.
Pakadaroka, the idea is to, okay, in as much as there is what is being equalized, Panapa, or what is being harmonized, is the ability for all people in marriages, whether general or customary, to claim using the Matrimonial Causes Act. Upon divorce, there should be fairness, there should be equity and justice in the sharing of matrimonial property. Also, the Matrimonial Causes Act, in a, from clauses 7 down to 11, a very clear formula that it uses when distributing property. So this is something that was not applied to my unregistered customary law unit. So when we talk about equal recognition, that is really the point of departure. But now getting into your question, Yvonne, in terms of what is more superior, or can I have a monogamous union and a polygamous union? The answer is no. And it's I can sort of see why citizens would have a problem understanding, because there seems to be a little bit of confusion.
Yeah.
But it's about what comes first.
Okay.
If you have a registered customary law union first, that is potentially polygamous, and then you can take your as many wives as you want. It's also potentially polyandrous, depending on your customs.
Okay.
Because Chief will confirm that kune mamwe customs anobvumidza kuti mudzimai ange ane varume vakawanda, anobvumidza kuti mudzimai ange ari kubhadhara the dowry, or it just depends on those diverse customs and what fits into that bracket of what your customary practices are. But if you have a customary marriage first, then that becomes potentially polygamous. Ukaita chapter 511, wozotora mumwe mudzimai zvakare, you could then be walking into bigamy, which is a criminal offense.
But how does it become a criminal offense?
It remains monogamous because you cannot have more than one wife under chapter 511. Ukachuza iwewe, so now I think it becomes a free for all. Kuti vanhu vemuZimbabwe choose which marriage that you want.
Usaite two. Kuti nhasi ndaita lobola squad ndabatanidzwa na chief. Mangwana ndakwenda kunoita chapter 5.11.
If it's with the same person,
it's okay.
Then go ahead, because I suppose it's up to you to have it done customarily, to have it done in the general way, the Eurocentric way. But it also then becomes a little bit confusing in terms of what is important. But kana matororana customarily, that is a marriage. Now it will be recognized as a marriage. Register it. You now have the same rights as someone under general law marriage, and then there's no need to then go further and contract and get into another marriage. If it's with the same person, which is what a lot of people do, for civil marriage, it's never been a requirement. It's not a requirement at all. But an exciting thing out of this act is now that customary law marriage, it is becoming a requirement that lobola be paid, because dom simboti watu we customary marriage. So we must be able to distinguish those two and perhaps not get into these situations. But if you have a chapter 511, you cannot marry someone else under chapter 511. You cannot marry another person under customary law union.
Okay, thanks for making that clear. Coming to you, Chief, we've heard what Rumbi has said and what she has explained in terms of the marriages that we have and what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. What are you doing as chiefs, or what can you do to ensure that we preserve our culture, tsika nemagariro? Because tine zvakawanda zvatikuita zvandataura izvozvo zvemalobola squad zvatikuita mazuva ano, michato iyoyi, vamwe vanoti haisi yedu chero iri pamutemo, kune vanozvipikisa kuti no izvi zvakauya izvi. Saka toita sei sevanhu kuti tinzwisise kuti tiri vanani tofamba negwara iroro?
Thank you, Yvonne. Maybe before I get to your question, let me clear the aspect that my friend brought in to say Chief can confirm that kune vamwe cultures anovhuma kuti mukadzi anogona kuita varume vakawanda. May I put it clear that in Zimbabwe there is no such culture that I know. Yeah, in as much as it can happen in other countries. But in Zimbabwe, it's only a man that marries one or more than one.
Okay.
Yes.
Atina vakadzi vanokwanisa futi kubvisa
There
rora.
is only polygamy and no, what do you call it?
Polyandry.
Polyandry is not there in Zimbabwe. No
Okay.
culture that we know that practices that.
All right.
If she has one, maybe she can bring it to our attention. It's just in other countries.
All right.
But your question, to start with, the law has already put it clear that in a customary marriage, Mono is obliged to pay lobola. So lobola already, what I'm saying about culture character, kana uchida kuroro nezvechivanhu, the law is already protecting that. Then you choose that and do it this way. So already, as traditional leaders, we've got a plus there, because our culture is not going to be eroded. And even those people that marry in the what they call civil marriage, chapter 5.37 before, is it?
Yes. Chapter 37.
37, 5.11,
formally, now 5.1.
That law was not, and is still not obliging people or mandating people to pay lobola. But you realize everyone that holds that piece of paper, they paid lobola first. Even though the law was not compelling them to do so. So which means in the back of our mind, we know that that wedding is not ours. Ours is to first pay lobola, which means we are still observing our culture as Africans. And we would advise and encourage our citizens to keep doing that, because that is what is ours. This other thing or this other aspect here, civil marriage, I see we're only embracing it because we're living in a global village. But other countries are not even compelling people or prescribing people to desist from their cultures. It is only us that put that aspect.
Okay.
But if it were to come to our cultures, you need to pay lobola, and marriage should not be secret. Marriage should be known by both parties and families from the other end and the other end. And it should be celebrated. Because we don't marry for ourselves, we marry for the family.
We marry for the family.
Yes.
All right, Junith, coming to you now, murikunzwa zvese zviri kutaurwa izvi. I'm sure zvinokubata sevanhu vanoshanda nema-widows. Ndingada kungoziva kuti zvekuti machief akukwanisa kuchatisa, muri kuzvigamuchira sei, muri kuzvionawo sei as an organization?
Tinozvigamuchira zvechokwadi, asi zvine kurwadza mukati. Nekuti iye zvinezvi vanenge vachitora vanogamuchira vochatisa murume ashayikirwa nemukadzi, havachatarisa mhuri yaasiya kumashure. Mukadzi uyu anga akasiya vana, baba ava pavanonochatiswa nemachifi iwaya vakutaura kuti mukadzi votora zita rangu inini mukadzi voriisa kumwana.
Okay.
Havachataura kuti anga ari mukadzi wangu, asi vakukwanisa sei kuzochatisa mumwe muchato wechitu nemunhu akambenga akachata muchato wokutanga nemwe mukadzi. Ipapo pakaoma, dai vachitanga vapaongorora ipapo, nokuti zviri kuchemedza vana vakawanda. Anzarwa kuti achataura kuti imba iyi yakanga iri yamai vangu, hakuchisina zvese izvi, vakutarisa muchato uripo kuti nhasi tisu tiripo nevana vangu, amaini navanhu vasara, tisu tiripo, tisu tiri pamba. Imimi vakuru vakazvarwa kudhara naamai ava, mai venyu hapachisina, vakatoiswa pavana. Ko vakatanga vadii kupaongorora apa kuti ko uyu mukadzi uyu nevana ava zvakamira sei, vozochatisa uyu.
Mambo, Newerumbi, is there a way yekuti tisati tachatisa tokwanisa kutsvaga zviri kumashure kana pane vanga vakabvisirwa rora chero pasina evidence iko zvino yekuzviratidza, kana kuti tinongotangira patiri tichienda?
Perhaps I can come in before Chief comes in. I think it's important to highlight that maybe let me talk about the previous position and get into what the new act says.
Okay.
Under the previous position, under general law, you do bans for marriage, and it means you must publish that you want to get married. The idea is that anyone who you may be married to should be able to come forward on that day and say, if there's anyone who knows of any lawful impediment to stop this marriage from continuing, please speak up now or forever to hold your peace. So Nyaya publication of my bans under general law marriage was there, and that provision to ensure that anyone who has any rights should come forward. We know that at our magistrates court they conduct civil marriages, that sometimes people show up and say And this is why, because the bans are published. It's not a secret, as Chief said. So then coming to nyaye ma customary law marriages, because they're potentially polygamous, nyaye kuti pane mumwe was really not a factor. It was now maybe kuti it's seniority. Aripo hake, but ndiripo zvakare. And then we all then share zviripo zvacho. Children always can claim maintenance, whether born out of customary unions or general law unions, even from an estate. Vana vane mvumo yekunge vachiclaim maintenance, and they can do that. Whether they are maybe the panoita a problem or a bit of a challenge is when they are now majors. But if it's for purposes of inheritance, vane mvumo in terms of our constitution as well, kuti vange vachiclaima ipapap. So now what happens under the new Marriages Act is that chiefs, religious leaders, and other players are now being given powers as marriage officers. And as a marriage officer, the chiefs have to then perform an interview of sorts, or they have to then ask certain questions. In order for you to be married, you must present yourself and the person that you want to marry, then you 2 witnesses at least, and then they ask you questions to ascertain whether or not you are married to someone else, to ascertain your other circumstances. And this is an important role that I think the chiefs and traditional leaders will play, because they have a responsibility in terms of the Marriage Act to even ask these questions. This is why there are witnesses coming from both sides. Kuti zvibvunzo kuti iwo kumhuri kwenyu haana umborora here munhu uyu, hakuna vamwe here, hakuna vamwe vana here, kana anga akarora, is it a chapter 37, chapter 511, is it another customary law union, is it registered, do you understand that you can also register that one, mozoya muchiregister iyoyo. This is what will happen now as the act goes on. And something also very important, Yvonne, before you defer, is that in as much as the act has been assented to by the president, in as much as the Marriages Act is now there, the effective date has not yet been published in the government gazette. The effective date is yet to be published. And more so you understand that administratively panenge patorine quite a lot to happen in all of our areas, my chief, even for them to be empowered to act as my marriage officers. There's a lot that needs to happen. People who previously had my unregistered customary law unions should also register them, so they present and say and it's a lot of work to be done. So the effective date has not yet been published in the government gazette, but the law, the act has passed the bill stage, and we have it now.
Okay.
Yes, I wanted to intervene Chema Mama, it will bring a lot of confusion, especially where a man was married, and then the wife passes on, and then the man marries again. That has been the case. If a woman passes on, and then I'm supposed to marry if I qualify to. I can marry, but that doesn't mean I'm deleting the children that I had before.
Okay.
I don't know where the challenge is, because whether my worker share, but still those children are my children. How do I lose them? It has been the case already, and even in the civil marriage that we have been practicing, we know of people that have married 3-4 times, but even divorce and it has never been an issue. But what it is now is takuita sekunge because kwakuchatisa madzimambo, then pachaita confusion. Aiwa vanhu vadzimai 3-4 already mumisha, right? But what it is now, we are legalizing those marriages. Kuti samboita marriage yokungoziva, but ngaite marriage yokuti vanhu vese vakuzviziva kuti vanhu varorana. Be it that ndaita vana wife A, wife B, wife C, vana vese vaya vana vangu, where property is supposed to be shared, they share equally. Apana anosiwa, everyone is brought on board. Sakavano, maybe it's an issue of understanding what the law says. We just fear the fear of the unknown, but yet there is nothing to fear about. All it means is we are now bringing all types of marriages on board, not leaving anyone behind. Yes.
Now that we're talking about, the sharing of property, puzzle, famu, konoton mazorambana, it just got me thinking, do we understand as Zimbabweans, or what does the law say in terms of these marriages and them being in community of property or out of community of property?
In the property sharing regime is a very important one because it guides the rights that you have from the onset. And for avoidance of doubt, I will state that in Zimbabwe, since as long back as 1929, our marriages have been out of community of property, and they remain out of community of property. And I certainly hope that I can comment on, I thought they would have made them in community of property by now, but anyway, what that means is that things that are registered in my name remain mine even if I marry someone else. So there is what's mine, what's his, what's hers, and then what's ours. So what the law concerns itself with is what is acquired jointly through joint effort, whether it's joint effort of me ironing your shirt every morning for you to go out there and then bring back the money. It also talks about doing away with the traditional, I suppose, the roles of breadwinner and stay at home and all of that. So contribution is considered when you are dealing with the distribution of matrimonial property. But from the onset, it only deals with things that are jointly acquired. So this means that you can actually go into a marriage with things that you've come, maybe you inherited something, it remains yours. Even if you go in the marriage, unless you enter into an anti-nuptial contract where you then, or a prenup as some call them, where you then decide that, we want to deal with our property differently, but the law recognizes that it's out of community of property. So you don't accrue property rights by marrying someone. It's only things that you come together jointly and you get. 50% automatically is mine. That's not the way the law operates. So everything is out of community of property and it remains so.
So munhu akarorwa nemunhu akasvika ine zvinhu zvake, dzimba dzake, magonyeti ake, chichi ndezvake.
Unless they put you on the title deed. Otherwise it remains zvinhu zvake. And then the contribution kuti maybe if you come on board what tiri tese, you then buy that house and I can say no, but ndakakupawo mari deposit, I contributed. That then becomes a joint asset and becomes subject to matrimonial property.
All right, I'll come to you, Chief.
Maybe to clear this last again, the noise is coming mostly from women, not from men. But yet, when I look at this piece of law, it will empower more madzimai than men.
How?
Before, and it the marriages are angasinga register as at par, right? And some women were suffering prejudice. Why suffer? Because they would not have been having anything to prove. But now everyone is being brought on board, whereby they are now treated equally. Mdzimai A and Mdzimai B. Why see what kunze A are now brought on board? Saka ngatisi kuita sekunge isusu when we marry because we want to accrue property kana murume afa. And why do we take it as if murume ndiye anofana kutangira mukadzi kufa every time? So let's, in a traditional way, we don't marry because we are looking at kuti murume achazofa. No, we marry because we want to live together. Of course, kufa kunozoya hako. And akusarudze kuti kunotanga ari. But now the noise that we are hearing most is like women are mostly concerned with what to get when the man dies. Why? Is it like women are killing men so that they get property? No. We should take it on a positive way to say we are marrying to stay together. Accrue whatever we shall accrue together. Kutindiana chazotanga kufa, that's fate ya mwari yoyo. So I think I wanted to dispel that notion. Women, please calm down. This law is bringing you on board and it is empowering women.
Anzina mambo calm down, zikamai mtemo utoripo. Pakuda kukuchengetedzai plus why muri kunyanya kufunga zvekufa kwemurume Sterek.
Hatisi kunyanya kufunga zvekufa kwemurume, asi kuti tiri kuteedza zvakatoitika. Hatisi kuenda mberi kokuti tinoti pane izvi murume ndiye achatanga kufa kana kuti mukadzi ndiye achatanga kufa. Tiri kushanda tiri mumashure mezvakaitika. Like zvamataura kuti kana munhu achichata anouya nemawitness both sides. Handiti murume ada kuita izvozvo anogona kuita kuronga zvake zvanoda nemusoro wake. Tinotori nadzo mhuri iye zvino dziri kuchema dziri kutambudzika dzakatosiiwa kunze. Hachisiri icho chido chababa chakanga chiripo vamaichatisa baba vaya kuti vakuzorasa mhuri. Hachisiri icho chido chavo, but then vasara manje ndo vakuchisapfisa nekuda kwemuchato uya waapo uya wakazoitwa nababa nemukadzi. Muri kuvanzwisisa? Muchato wavakazoita baba, asi kuti baba hachisi chido chavo chekuti vana vangu vagosara vachitambudzika. Vakusara vachitambudzwa.
But vana ava hanti vari kuchengetedzwa nemutemo.
Yes. Children are protected. They are by the state.
Vazhinji vanenge vatoraswa. Vatosara vapo ndevamai varipo vane muchato uripo uri fresh uyu.
Chandingangotaura ipapo ndechikurudzira madzimai in those situations vanenge vashayikirwa kuti shandisai mutemo uripo. Nyaya maintenance is something that can easily be done, and you can even do it mbune on your own as a self-actor.
Like ipapa ndimuri kuona pandikuedza kutsanangura ende ndiri kutotaura through experience nezvatiri kuona handiti ipapa pandiri kutoedza kutsanangura nezvapo ndepana amai vakatotanga kufa kwete kuti baba vakatanga kufa ndaamai vakatanga kufa omva vasiya vana vavo baba ndokuroora mumwe mukadzi varoora mumwe mukadzi vakanochinjinura but vaitori nemba nemhuri yavo vakanochinjinura vakaita muchato naamai nina vaita muchato naamai nina izvino vana vamai nina ndo vari kutobenefita vamai vakuru ava vakatoraswa uko havachabhenefita baba vai vakanga varipo vachimirira mhuri yavo vega kuti both vakadzi vavo kuti uku nekuku hapachina uyo akudhila nemutemo kuti ndine mutemo womuchato imba iyi yakatowanikwa naamai zvekutoti mukacherechedza kuti first born yababa ava yakatoinzana nenumber 3 yamai first yamai vadiki vakauya.
And nyaya vari kutaura iri kunyanyonetsa even pafacebook pedu because pane munhu ari kuti surviving spouse law gives the new wife more benefits.
Yes.
Ndo nyaya iri kungonetsa minoti.
Ndo nyaya iri kutoitika iyoyo.
How does it give the new wife more benefits? Kana first wife afa
first wife afa.
Mada uta benefit say asisi.
Afa asiya vana.
Vana vano benefit pamutemo.
Yeah.
Not approaching the courts for that remedy.
Political will is important.
Yes. Because if they approach the courts, vakaenda kumutemo hakuvarasi. Hakuvarasi, and even muchivano chedu isusu. I'm talking as a chief.
Okay.
We don't ignore those children vakatanga kuwepo. We don't. Even kana inini ndazofasa baba futuo. The family, because like I said, we don't marry for ourselves. We marry for our families. The family vanenge vachiziva kuti no papa ina madhawu vakatanga kuroorwa pano vane vana avo nevavo makazouya inge man'ove handiti mukazoita vana ava saka vese vana vani vababa ava hativarasi. Well, if such is happening, it's either those people havasisimo mutradition avachazivi kuti kune madzimambo vanogona kuvabatsira oro vari mumataundi but vasingaendi kumakoti futi.
Saka muri kungokurudzirwa kunzi mutemo unochengetedza especially vana vanenge vasiyiwa. So those people should approach the courts. Mutemo unovachengetedza vanopiwa zvinenge zvakaringana navo.
Absolutely.
So now coming to you, Rumbi, I mean, the bone of contention here seems to emerge mostly from the courts, recognizing my girlfriends, my small house, or these civil partnerships or civil marriages, I don't know what they're being called. Do panenge parku simukanya ya yese kuti iweo uri married under your chapter 5.11 or under your customary marriage, but you've got your civil partnership somewhere. In the event of death yataurwa nachief kuti kune muri kunyanyotarisira zvekufa, but in the event that something happens, all right, chinoda kuti pasheyiwe ma-properties zvinofamba sei?
Thanks so much for that one. There are only two things that are that are going to visit everyone and anyone watching this: taxes and death. So we must talk about death, and we must be, we must forecast and be prepared for it. In this instance, I don't want us to waste an opportunity to revel in something very progressive that this Marriages Act does. When you look at civil partnerships, Yvonne, it's not just about girlfriends and extramarital affairs. Yes, granted, there is an opportunity for people who fall under this bracket to claim, but there's a criteria. And if they meet this criteria, then yes, it is indeed a civil partnership. Okay. Some of the conditions that you're supposed to meet, and the court then looks at the relationship and says, okay, how long have you been together? That's the first one. What is the nature of your relationship? Is it intimate? Is it a sexual relationship? Are there any children? What is you talked about the public recognition or public, what does the public think of public, potential, perception rather, around the relationship, and what the reputation of the relationship is also looked at publicly. So these are all factors, and the court is then given wide discretion to then say, okay, this qualifies as a civil partnership. So in a lot of instances, do extramarital affairs meet those qualifications? Are you living together on a genuine domestic basis? And even things like financial interdependence, in the same house here. So if I'm coming and going, that's not a genuine domestic relationship.
But you could be coming and going, but still taking care of me.
But then the court will look at, but is it on a genuine domestic basis?
And who determines a genuine domestic basis? And
Court
what
will
was the
determine
criteria?
that. For now, it's a new provision that is being tested for the first time through this act. And it helps if people come forward, and this will form jurisprudence and precedent, because it's never been tested before.
Okay.
It's never been tested. And then I want to come to the reason why I say this is a triumph when we talk about civil partnerships.
Okay.
There are several people who are together right now, who have been together right now for many years. They're investing time, money, they've got children together, but their unions or their relationship is not recognized as a marriage, either at customary law, either at general law, even religiously. So there is a whole subset of people who are left vulnerable. Because when these relationships end, that justice and equity in sharing the property, it clearly spelled out in the Matrimonial Causes Act, didn't apply to these relationships or situationships or extramarital arrangements. So now what's happening is you are now being given leeway to come forward and say, okay, show us that you've been together on a genuine domestic basis. I think that's where the answers for people and their fears can be allayed, in terms of, oh, does this not mean that now it's a lot of immorality? Does this not mean that it's a word that I can't even say on national television? But you must understand that there's a criteria. It's not a free for all. Just because I claim that I'm in a civil partnership doesn't mean that the court will agree with me and then give me those rights.
But again, as the chief was saying, kuti isusu madzimai, we are at the forefront kuchema. But let's look at maybe amai vangu pamwe vagara na baba vangu for 30 years vasina kubvisirwa kana tsvakirai kuno pachivanhu unenge uchinzwa kuchaya mapoto mutemo wauya mambo woti tiri kukuchengetedza zvakashata here.
Azvina per se in this aspect from the traditional point of view. Murume akarora anogona kungoitawo musikanzwa kana I would call it.
Okay.
Oita mwana nomumukadzi. Anditi? Pane inonzi kuperekwa. Yes, we used to observe that.
Yes.
We still observe that. We don't ignore it according to our traditions. But I don't know how civil these civil partnerships are. Well, I have yet to be educated on those, because it's put in a very sophisticated terminology to an extent that it's confusing the public.
Yeah.
But all it means, or I would understand from the traditional point of view, is that a man is married, and then of course he has got another woman that he lives with someone. Anopereka, then what's the
all right.
So that happens already. But I know kana makuti civil partnership now andichaziva kuti ndezviya zvatagara chiziya here or it's another new form of relationship that is being robbed in.
Komuna visirwa tsvakirai kuno pachivanhu tingati arorwa.
Anenge asina kuroorwa, but nechiziva kuti mwana uyu mwana wekuno.
All right.
Yes.
Munoiona sei nyaya yema-civil partnerships yatanga tichitsanangurirwa panapa?
Tiri kuinzwisisa nekuigamuchira tichidzidza nekusaziva.
Okay.
Nekuti kazhinji pamwe tisingazive kuti mutemo wacho unofamba sei. Tichigamuchira zviri kutaurwa namambo wedu kuti vana vane right yekuti vaende kumatare edzimhosva kuti vatsanangure mazvarirwo ava vakaitwa nababa vavo nemabhethi avo nezvinhu zvavo zvese uratidza pachena kuti tiripo. Kana paine nhaka iripo yababa yakasiyiwa iripo, vosherwa pachena vese zvakanaka. Asi chaakuzonyanya kurwadza mai ndechekuti kana amai vakasara varipo vadika ndovari kutora masimba ose ekuzorasa vamwe vana.
And nyaya iyoyo maisimbirira yanetsa. And it's unfortunate that we've run out of time. I had 15 questions. I only managed to ask 5. Wow. So yeah, we will need another series, 2 series, mamwe kuti tikwanise kutaura nyaya iyi tiipedze, because we really didn't do justice to it. So hopefully I'll invite you again next week so that we talk about it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you very much for having joined us on Inside Out today. We're looking at the New Marriage Act, chapter 5.15. Tataura nezvayo, tatsanangurwa nevemtemo, nema-traditional leaders edu, nevanoshanda futi nema-widows, kuti vari kugamuchira sei uye zveunorevei. But then unfortunately we haven't been able to exhaust. So join us again the same time next week as we continue with the discussion. Pleasant viewing.